Every Sunday is a unique event, because a Jewish man who lived 2,000 years ago was executed as a dangerous criminal at the age of 33. He was buried for 3 days and 3 nights, and then he was back with his friends on the 4th day, eating supper with them. And he stayed around for 6 weeks and then disappeared and has not been seen since. Millions believe that he is still alive and that he will come back to planet Earth again. There's a worldwide religion based on this, of which you are part. 1/3 of the population of the world profess to believe the facts I've just given you. Friends of Christianity and enemies of Christianity know that everything stands or falls on whether Jesus was raised from the dead. That's the crucial fact. If it didn't happen, we are engaging in the biggest fraud in history. And we should be closing this church and every other church in Singapore. It would all have been based on an outright lie. Christianity would fall altogether. And if that were true, we should be honest and admit that we built the whole thing on a lie and given false comfort and delusion to people. And if that is so, then Christianity should die out. It has misled too many people. Now, many would be happy for the church to go as long as Jesus stayed. I meet a lot of people who are in favor of Jesus, but not in favor of the church. That's a very common attitude in my country. They don't realize that Jesus said, I have come to build a church, to build my church. But there it is. Many accept his noble teaching. People like the Indian Mahatma Gandhi or the Russian Dostoevsky, and they believe that Jesus was a great moral teacher. Muslims believe he's a great prophet, but no more. The resurrection proves that he is not just a great teacher or a prophet. He's something very much more. Without the resurrection, you could not believe in Jesus. He said things about himself that are just not true if he didn't rise from the dead. If he did, everything he said is true, and he is vindicated before a world. The choice we have about Jesus, he was either a lunatic, a liar, or the Lord. Everybody in the world has to decide which of those 3 things is the truth. Or to put it another way, he was either mad, bad, or God. And you've got to decide which. And I thank God that you have decided the right thing. Well, now, there are some who even deny that he died. But we believe he died, was buried, and rose again before his body rotted in the grave. That's the heart of the Christian faith. Faith is not based on feelings, but on facts. And I want to say this morning, I'm dealing with facts. First, I'm going to talk about those facts and the evidence for them. But then I want to get onto the meaning of those facts, because most Christians really don't seem to understand the significance of the fact of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. The 5 things I want to talk to you about are, first of all, the sequence of the resurrection. Let's get the story clear. Let's get the facts right. And some of you are in for a few surprises, I think, there. Then I will move on to the evidence for Jesus' resurrection from the dead, assuming that you are not a Christian and that you need to be convinced that it really happened. And thirdly, I want to move on to the significance of what happened. What is its essential meaning? And then I want to move on to the essence of the resurrection. What is the heart of it? And then I want to speak about the consequence of the resurrection for you and for the whole world in which we live. And finally, the experience of the resurrection, because that's what finally convinces you when you yourself meet the risen, ascended, living Lord. Well, that's the agenda for this morning. So you're in for a long talk. Now, Jesus sat to teach, and rabbis sit to teach, so why shouldn't I? I'm 83 years old, so I'd rather sit and teach. But people tell me that they like it better because I'm more relaxed in talking to you and you're more relaxed listening to me. So let's move on to the facts. Let's get the facts straight. And two shocks for you. Jesus did not die on a Friday. I know the church has taught that for hundreds of years, but it doesn't fit the facts. And he didn't rise on a Sunday morning. There's another fact that you need to grasp. Because there are contradictions apparently in the gospel story. Some of the gospels say that he was in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. And you can't fit that in between Friday afternoon and Sunday morning. Not possibly. Were you ever puzzled when you read that? I hope you were. And then other gospels say that he was alive on the 3rd day. Now those two statements contradict each other. Why did the church then develop the tradition, for that's what it is, that he died on a Friday afternoon? Because everybody knows that he had to be buried quickly after he died. He died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was buried before 6 in the evening, because the Sabbath day began, and he had to be buried before the Sabbath. Sabbath is a day of rest on which you can't bury people. And so they hurried through the funeral. But if only people had read the Bible carefully, they would know that that Sabbath was not a Saturday. It was not the weekly Sabbath. John's Gospel tells us it was a special Sabbath, a high Sabbath, a special day of rest and holiday. And the Jewish Passover feast, which could be any day of the week, began with one special Sabbath day of rest. And it was that Sabbath, which could have been on any day of the week, before which Jesus died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So it was not a Friday. Jesus himself said, I'll be 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb. So it couldn't have been Friday. I'll come now to what I believe fits the evidence. He died on the Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock, on the day before the Passover. And that's highly significant because thousands of lambs had their throats cut at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the day before the Sabbath, before the Passover. And he died at exactly that moment, which is why the New Testament says, our Passover lamb has been sacrificed for us. Now, when I say that he didn't rise on a Sunday morning, you must remember that the Jewish day began at 6 p.m. on the previous evening, at sunset. And so the Jews counted a day from sunset to sunset. And therefore, the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, was on Saturday, which ended at 6 p.m. And the first day of the week then began. The first working day of the week began at 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. And there's only one fact that will explain the facts, and that is that Jesus rose between 6 p.m. and 12 midnight on Saturday evening. For the Jews, that was the first day of the week. And we know from the story that the women came to the tomb long before daylight the next morning, and the tomb was already empty. So the two facts I want to share with you are that Jesus died on a Wednesday afternoon at 3 o'clock on the day before the Passover Sabbath, when the Passover for the week began, and that he rose again on Saturday evening between 6 p.m. and midnight. And the significance of that is that for the Jew, that was the first day of the week. What we call Sunday doesn't begin at midnight. For the Jew, it begins at sunset the previous day. That's because of Genesis 1. We think a whole day consists of the morning and the night, the day and the night, the morning and the evening. But the Bible begins, there was evening and morning the first day. And from that, Jews to this day reckon a day from sunset to sunset in accordance with the scripture. But the Romans, on which our calendar is based, go from midnight to midnight. And we don't think a day has begun until midnight and will end the following midnight. That's a Western habit which we inherited from the Romans. Now then, we come to the crucial thing. In your New Testament, the Jewish nation was occupied by the Romans. And they were in the difficulties of having two calendars or two clocks. If Jesus rose, if he died on the Wednesday afternoon and rose on Saturday night after 6 p.m., then every single thing said about the timetable fits perfectly. He was then 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb, as he said he would be. But also he rose on the 3rd day, according to the Roman thinking, because their thinking was that 6 p.m. to midnight on Saturday was the 3rd day. And suddenly everything in the Bible fits perfectly.